Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. Yes, they did. They absolutely got it right. This is Tom Navolis, your host, and I am so delighted that you're taking the time to spend with me again this Saturday. We have a lot of interesting developments. We've seen much more in respect to this coronavirus insanity, the addition of the evil, if you will, that has come upon us. And I'm going to take kind of this really different twist today, in that as it went out in the promo, I asked a question, or in regards to a statement that I've heard over many, many years in the evangelical community, that being that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And my question is, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that? And so that's going to kind of take us down some different twists, if you will, in respect to that. If you don't believe that, and I have been convinced over the last 40 years that even many in the pulpits, although they parrot those words, they don't believe it. And it all ties back into the whole theme for this year being political theology. How does that all meld together? What does that mean? And as I noted in the promo, is that I'm even more convinced that there are many, many people in many pulpits that do not believe that God is the same, regardless of a time period, only because what we're seeing in a lot of action or non-action over the last 40 plus years, as well as what I'm looking at as I study in putting together this new book that I'm writing on the Last Puritan. As I mentioned in the program promo, is that irregardless of where you are in respect to whether America came about or was initiated as a Christian nation, the core concept of Christianity within that and the starting of America had included in it, instantiated in it, the fundamental principles of Christianity. I'm also noting in the references within that promo, as well as you can find them at samueladamsreturns.net for the archive. I'm going to take and do a legal opinion out of those people that I really, really like in Lonang, the Law of Nature and Nature's God website, because I think that it is well articulated in that understanding. And what we've seen is that even our modern law and science fundamentally forget, because of the brilliance of the intelligentsia, as we've talked about before, whether that is in science, whether that is in law, whether that is even in theology. I guess I think that they have, no, I don't think. I take that back. It's more than that. I believe, without any question, I believe that they do not believe, those people that I said, that intelligentsia. You have to remember that although we know that there are those in academia, within the science, and within technology, and within political science, and within the law, and those in theology. Yeah, they may be smart, but I don't think they really believe, even within theology, I do not think that they believe that God is the same across all spectrums of time and into eternity. It's proving out. So I do know that there are some that do. I don't know all of them, but the ones that I find pretty solid, very solid, ones that I will reference right here is none other than Pastor Doug Wilson and his staff. I got to say, Toby, Pastor Toby there, the sermon that he just preached that we'll talk about through today's program a little bit. It's kind of a reference, but that sermon is really top notch, and respecting that understanding that if we understood God as the same, then we would do exactly what I had a conversation with Doug Wilson with a number of years ago when he and I became reacquainted, if you will, is that I mentioned to him, we live our eternity now. This very moment that I am talking with you, everything you believe, everything you do, everything that you take in is because of your theology and how you believe that God is. God said to Abraham, I am. One of the, what do you call that in English when you take and you go through past, present, future, all of that type of stuff? We can say God is because he says he am. That means I am. He is. So it comes down to that whole piece is that, we live in a time reference, and, I could talk a lot about that from my physics background. What is, time, space, and all of those types of things from Einstein's theory of relativity, and we could get into all sorts of other mathematical discussions and scientific stuff. But the bottom line is God is. He is the great I am. And that means you're living your eternity right now. So when it comes to the reference of political science and political theology, we get into this whole piece that what you are taking and believing about the COVID, I call it the China virus, the China flu, your reactions to those authorities that are dealing with the China flu, how you're going to live your life in reference to that, whatever's going to happen politically is all going to be interesting. So another person that I think is pretty solid, and I mean pretty solid, is all you folks down in Lima, you know who he is. You know Dr. Mike Spalding. And he is solid. He lives his eternity now. He understands that. And so he, may be of a different denominational perspective than Pastor Doug Wilson and all of those other Reformed folks out there. But the fact of the matter is he's involved. He lives it. He lives it from the whole perspective of a Reformation-minded, biblically sound person. I think that's pretty impressive. Now, there's so many others that may be even in the so-called Reformed environment, whether they're Presbyterians, whether they're Independents, whether they are whatever they are, and they don't live it. They don't live that statement, and that's including Reformed Baptist and Reformed whomever, not to even think about all of those others that are outside of that, but are in that evangelical environment, and that of those that are even within the Roman or the Greek Orthodox or some of the other larger denominational perspectives. They may parrot, God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. What does that mean? In the next segment, we're going to get into it a little bit from my personal studies and kind of jump through to stretch your brain. And I know this is political networks that I'm on, but at the same time, there is no politics that is outside of your theological perspective. So how you view what you believe is your God. What is your God? Who is your God? Is it the God of the full, complete, and total Bible? Or is it the God of academia? Is it the God of science? That's what a lot of we're being dependent on right now in America, unfortunately, is the God of science in reference to this China flu. Is it the God of environmentalism? Is it the God of the weather? Is it the God of the trees out there in the yard? Is it the God of the forest, of the snow, of the mountains, of the ocean? What is your God? And is that meaning all of those things that I mentioned the God of the Bible? Your political perspective is all going to be wrapped around that. And I'm going to talk about that in the second segment because the living God, the I am God, did establish governance. And he established governance for the well-being of mankind and to have a civil society. So when we hear the pencil necks and the slip teeth Nancy Pelosi, speaking and talking about the nonsense that they do and the fact that, we're looking at government to solve all. Government cannot solve all. Government is only a mechanism. And when they talk about a civil society, they don't go back to where the source of a civil society is. Who it is. Who can give us a civil society? It sure isn't pencil neck and slip tooth or Jabba the Hutt from New York. What's his name? What's that guy's name? What is Nadler? Jabba Nadler? Jabba the Nadler. There you go. Anyway, I think we have a right to call these evil people out for what they are. They are that exactly evil. I was talking to someone this week about pencil neck, and the guy's crazy. The guy's this. No, the guy's possessed. So if we look, and I'm going to hit towards the end of closing out this segment with this: if God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow for all of eternity, that means that there are devils, there are evil spirits, there are those that will possess those willing to go against God. And there's results for that. That's kind of what we're going to talk about in the next segment is God cannot be mocked. He will judge not only individuals, but he will judge nations. He will use that which is in creation to do exactly that. And he will raise up those types of leaders that will be able to help a society move through those evils and those judgments. But my question is, for all of you out there, where are those evangelicals, leaders that'll be in the pulpits that take and will say and live and act as if God, the great I am, is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow? Sam Adams, that last Puritan, as his moniker says, knew it, believed it, and acted on that truth. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did get it right. And again, this is Tom Navolis, your host, and I'm so delighted that you came back for the second segment after that first segment, and as I always do, all you folks out there on Liberty Works Radio Network, I am delighted that you did not turn off the program and that you're here to hear more about what we're going to be talking about in this segment. But with that, I sure would like you to take and go look at the other hosts and hostesses. And as I always ask, is kind of scroll around there and find that donate button. And please donate. This is a listener-funded network. This is for you. I mean, it does have a spread of things. It's not just a political, as you well know if you've been listening and paying attention to this network for any period of time. There is that spiritual aspect. There is more than that. There is the God aspect. And there are a number of people on this network that are in that category that I did not list in the first segment, who understand and live the reality that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on this network. I mean, I don't think the network would have them on if they didn't know how to apply in a manner that is to have a civil society within the framework that we are given in America. And that is that framework of federalism under a constitutional republic. So as I was looking at, and as we kind of closed out that first segment, we talked about that Sam Adams, the Last Puritan. Well, I'm not going to get into all the details of that, but something that I went back to, and it was really interesting, is that when I go through and I'm searching for what it means to be that Last Puritan, what were the things that Sam Adams wrote? What was the critical components within his life that exemplified the ideals, thought processes, philosophy, theology that would allow Sam Adams to have that moniker of the Last Puritan. So I'm searching everything that I have in all of my historic digital records, and I do that, on a particular word. And the words that drew me back to what is referenced once again in the program references, and so you can find them in the archives at samueladamsreturns.net, was to this whole discussion that I actually referenced back on February 29th's program. It's only about a month ago. I thought it was rather uncanny that I would be refocused back to this particular article that he wrote, an article signed Vindex, that was January 21st of 1771, and in that February 29th program, I was talking about the potential lessons that we could draw from this letter in relationship to what happened during the trial, in particular, of the Boston Massacre. And again, I referenced that then, trying not to make the parallels, if you will, with what was going on with Donald Trump. But I think the generalization that was more important from that historical perspective, that there's nothing new under the sun, that mankind, if we're not believing in that point that I'm stressing of the great I am, what does that mean? And do we live by that? I can say the answer is no. The answer is we don't live by that. We haven't lived by that. So that brings me, before I delve into this letter more, this article, I want to go into what I inferred from the first segment. Oh, you thought I was going to forget that, didn't you? Gotcha. Oh, yeah. And it's not even April Fool's. That was past. That was in the middle of the week. There you go. So, what I've been doing in my, well, I don't know, probably a month now in my personal morning studies is in the book of Numbers. What I'm doing this year in my personal studies is trying to not only take what's principal truth that is being developed, but what is it that God has done to develop that political theology. It goes hand in hand as I research the writings of Sam Adams. I'm looking at what has God done to develop a mechanism of a civil society. What does that mean so that we could live in peace, that we could live in a manner that is honoring God, that we live in that way that His glory would fill the earth. That's amazing. Well, actually, it's not that amazing because that's something that he actually said in Numbers, is that His glory would fill the earth. He said it back then. And so when we look at Numbers, you have Israel that just, was allowed to leave, none other than Egypt, the slavery, the bondage, the insanities that were going on there, the loss of any type of hope, the killing of children, the killing, it was, just, I don't know. You could take and look at it maybe like in some regard if we can, or maybe, I don't know. I may be reaching on this one. Look at China or Venezuela today. They're enslaved. I think there's some modern enslavement that is here in America too, but that's more like, how are we enslaved because we're not living and acting out our republic? We're not acting out federalism. We're not taking and actually doing that which the Federalists hoped for and the Anti-Federalists warned would come upon us if we did not continue to have what the Federalists hoped for, a moral and virtuous society, a people. So that throws it always, as I said, back on the pastor's shoulders, because the only way you're going to have a moral and virtuous people is that if those from the pulpit really believed that the great I Am is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and even just took a walk through Numbers. Instead of taking in too many people, and I think Toby references this in the sermon that I have in the references. If not, I know that Doug Wilson has talked about it in the past, is that too many people, and I've talked about it in past with other people, is that too many times what we do in our modern times is look at the me thing for scriptures. Oh, how does that apply to me? Oh my goodness. Not only about, where we are on a sinful basis. We don't want to know how that applies to us in relationship to our personal sin, nor do we want to know about how it applies to our national sins. But what we hear more from the pulpit is, this applies to you like that. Oh, and not even how it applies to you or how you should apply it, but this is there. And this is for all the people. This is for the and it's like, it's either focused on me, and I, and how do I, and instead of what is the grander picture? How is it not only from that personal relationship between God and myself, but then how does it become contextual in all that is happening around us? And then what does that mean when I go to work, when I take and I interact with people in the grocery store, not just the social distancing, but how do I walk my grocery cart through the store, running and dodging and banging and whatever else? Anyway, so in Numbers, what we have is the people being led by none other than God, both as a cloud, during the day, or as a pillar of fire at night. And every time he desired to speak to Moses, there's references in there, is that his glory would come down. So here we have the people of Israel who not only saw these miracles, if you want, these events, if you want, that happened in Egypt, but throughout all of this time, and you can go do the math on the references, all of this time, which wasn't that long, that took them to the place where now they had the tabernacle, and then they were being led by God himself. And when they cried out and they acted stupidly, and they were whining their pants off, well, they didn't wear pants, so they're whining their robes off, God chastised them for non-belief. And I thought what was really interesting, in one instance, when they were crying out for meat because they got tired of manna, he said, okay, you're going to get as much as you want until it is, what? Nasty in your teeth. It would rot while people were still taking a bite of it. It'd be great. You know, there's a bird, oh boy, yum. Take a bite, and it would rot in their teeth right then and there. Interesting stuff. So we're going to lead into the next segment because I'm not going to finish this, but I think it's really critical from a point of political theology and just what that is meaning. In that, what God formed up, if you remember, he designed how Israel would form up around the tabernacle. He called for people to take and have that leadership come before Moses. He designed it in such a way that it would be over the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, and the 10,000s. He also took and he did a census from the age of 20 and up. Interesting thing is, that becomes very important as a generation, especially that generation that rejected what God would have the people to do. There were other times, even within the context of Israel in Numbers, where pestilence was set upon them as punishment. Very specific, too. Go in there and check that out, because it was very, very specific on how he actually killed people for disobedience to him specifically. One example of not killing, but specific, what would I say? A specific example would be with Miriam when she spoke against Moses. God struck her with leprosy. Moses intervened for her, but God said, nope, send her out outside the camp as you would anybody else with leprosy for 7 days. And after 7 days, she was returned to normal. See, these things don't happen strangely. Natural events are used by God for various reasons. Personal sin, national sin. Where do they come from? I know the scientists want to play with that one. Non-belief, again, whoever your theological God is, your national theological God, all comes into effect on that. But Sam Adams and the Anti-Federalists, and many of them, understood the biblical God of the Reformation history within its context. Sam Adams was called the Last Puritan for a lot of reasons, but primarily as a man of faith. And he understood that as it applied then into what he did politically. and where he was active. So come on back in the next segment as we finish up with this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. They got it right. And all of you folks out there in Lima, Ohio, I'm going to give you the call letters because I wrote them down this time, WTTP 101.1 FM on Soaring Eagle Radio. So glad that you're back. You missed parts of the second segment there. Go back to SamuelAdamsReturns.net and download the podcast, or go on YouTube. Check it out. And I would ask that, I guess this is the way you get people to follow you on YouTube. Hit that like button and what's that? A subscribe button. That's it. I don't do very well at that. But do that. And then, in these times, if you do want to help out the program here, I would ask you go to pepper-licious.com and get some of our jams, dehydrated peppers, and if you're ready to plant things out here in this fabulous weather, why don't you even buy some seeds for some really good stuff. Anyway, that's how you can help the program out in a couple different ways, is subscribe to the podcast on whichever of the media you are listening to the podcast, and then if you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel as well. So let's get back to where we were talking here. We were talking in numbers. So I think that the interesting one to me, as I was kind of finishing I wasn't finishing numbers, but in the middle of numbers, let me put it that way. What happens here. Let's talk to that story, and then we'll see if we have even time for some stuff on Sam Adams. But as it is there, we have seen that Israel is brought to that place where they're just outside of the land of Canaan, and they're promised land to go in and take the land, and God would be there and he'd take them in. So they send out the spies. From the story, many of you do, maybe some don't. But as it goes, the spies went through, wow, was on their minds. They come back, they bring these giant grapes, all of that. And, Caleb and Joshua, let's go. But the other 10, oh no, there's giants in the land. There live in fortified cities. There's this, there's that. And they convinced the people to do what? Don't go. Don't go in. Caleb stands up and goes, no, we can go. God is with us. We got to go do this. We got to do it. No. So we get all of these detractors in all sorts of different ways. So I always ask the question is, who are your giants? Who are the ones that are taking and keeping you from following what God's design is for you? I'll have them. We've all gone through that. So at that point, God looks at Moses and says, you know what? Let's start over, dude. I'm here. I'm telling you right now, I'm tired of these people. I'm sick and tired of them. I'll wipe them out right here and now, and I'll make a people bigger, greater, better through you than what these people are. Moses intervenes and says, no, you do that, then you're going to have all these people down in Egypt saying, look at what this God did. He couldn't even handle all of these detractors, all of these people of non-faith. God goes, Moses? Yeah, I get it, because I know what you were going to say, and I get what you're saying, but the bottom line is that they're not going to get away with it. So through Moses, God tells the people, guess what? All of you that went through the census of 20 years and over, your bones are going to be laying all over the desert. You are not going to see the promised land. you're going to die out there. And because of the 40 days, you're going to get 1 year for every day. That's how long you'll be out there wandering, and be your kids who you thought were going to be victims will be the victors. And then on top of that, you 10 loudmouth distractors, I would call them, anyway, I'm not going to tell you what I would call them. But anyway, those 10 loudmouth distractors, the word say is God killed them with pestilence. He killed them with a disease. He killed them with something. Done. And then he sent, obviously, Israel off on his journey, and there's more there in Numbers to go look at. So, what's my point on all of this? The question, especially to evangelical ministers or my friends that may still be wanting to listen to the program, my question to you is then, is God the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow? Does that mean that God can use and does use and will send pestilence to glorify himself? Will he judge with it? Will he judge individuals, and will he judge nations? Will he take and act according to his own counsel? And will he take and allow things to happen that science will take and overcome? Science will define as the means and the mechanisms of it being let loose inside of a lab. Will it be genetically engineered by some evil means and methodologies? Who's your God? Yeah. Can all that be used? Without question. But what does it mean when we sit here and we look at a nation in America that, very interesting. You're going to have to excuse me a second here as I take and I jump over to this email that has a chart in it that was put out by this individual that I thought was very, very telling. In that, I want to go through this chart, and here's the chart. Okay, here it is. You can see it. Worldwide debts from January 1st to March 25th. Look at what it says. You have 21,297 coronavirus, 113,000 and change seasonal flu, 228,000 and change malaria, 249,900, so almost 250,000 suicides. Okay, 300 and say 14,000 there. Traffic fatalities. 300 and say 91,000 if you round up. HIV/AIDS. 582,000 from alcohol. Here, 1.16 million from smoking, 1.9 million from other cancer, 2.38 million from hunger. Okay, America. Chinese flu, 9.9 million abortion. I don't know about you, but infanticide later in the scriptures, when we saw that happening in Israel, in the Gihon Valley, we saw that it was the practices of offering children to Moloch, all of that, infanticide, the killing off of generations of people. God judged for that. other major forms of immorality, God judged for that. I don't know about you, but it makes me think as I study scriptures, which again depends on how you study the scriptures. I mean, some people will hit that focus thing that I talked about, and it's all about, oh, what does this apply to me? How is this about me, me, me? How is it about I? And forgetting that it's a bigger picture. And if we're going to have a civil society, which Sam Adams really talked about and he taught about and he acted for, he talked about needing a moral society. He talked about having morality and instruction in schools and all of that, which we don't have anymore. You know, you talk about morality in a school and you're going to get fired. If you're not LGBT and LBQHRZY elementus TOP in it, you're going to get fired. When you're talking about 9.9 million abortions, and this was January 1st through March 25th, worldwide data. So you can carve out the American piece in there, okay? And that's only in 2020, okay? So that's January, February, March, not even a full 3 months, 9.9 million abortions, and then all of the others that are, in the chart that you saw, I brought up for you. Wow, I just wonder, does God have a right to judge the world? Well, he destroyed the world one time by flood, if I remember the story of Noah, and he said he wouldn't do it that way again. In fact, he gave us the rainbow as a promise not to be used by perversion. So yeah, I mean, we've even perverted the rainbow. Interesting. That's pretty sick. So I guess, what do I have, Kat? 2 minutes? 2.5 minutes. Sam Adams talked about it. Okay, I'll take a minute here to try and go through and see if I can cover this piece for you here a little bit. And again, you can go back and look at it from back in February. But you think the inhabitants of this continent are to be duped by an artful use of the words liberty and slavery in an application to their passions? I'm picking out here. Do you think that we, the citizens, can distinguish here between realities and sounds, and by a proper use of that reason which heaven has given them, they can judge? This is what Sam Adams is saying, the reason that God gave us. We should judge by reason, that we know what's better when there is a danger of slavery, and that ultimately we can look at how we would deal within our weaknesses. There's so much more I want to delve into. I'm just taking all of that few paragraphs apart, and actually it's one giant paragraph. We don't have time to do it. I want to spend this last minute talking about, once again, where I opened on that political theology. They go hand in hand, and for a civil society, God gave us a framework, especially in America, for a political mechanism, but even as the Federalists proclaimed, it had to be with a what? Moral and virtuous people. A moral and virtuous people. So with that moral and virtuous people, that would mean that you would have to have a framework of who is your God. Is it the I am, who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow? Sam Adams believed that. He lived it. He wrote it. And there are some here. How about you? Who is your God in America?